Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is all about beginning with the end in mind. And I'm going to dive into what does this actually mean from your business perspective and how does that impact your human design's ability to create a successful, profitable, sustainable business. Whew, that's a lot of O's, but y'all, like this episode is really here to tell you about where you begin is so important, but without knowing where you're going, and that beginning is going to be so much more chaotic, so much more random, and we want you to feel really good about where you're going. I want you to truly know that what you desire in your life and in your business is possible. And in this episode, I'm going to dive into ways from a strategic perspective you can not only begin with the end in mind, like how is this going to impact your business from a strategic perspective, but also from an energetic perspective, from that human design perspective. How does it look specifically for you when you are actually starting with the end in mind? And depending on how much you already have dived into your human design, one of the things that I highly encourage you to do, if you have not already, pull one of the interactive human design charts from my website. You can access the link in my Instagram at I am Anna Nichols, or you can grab it from the show notes here. But having the interactive chart as I'm talking about some of these things, as you are just on your own journey of exploration, that is going to help you so much because instead of having to go search a bunch of different places, this is such a cool tool because you get to hover over it and it gives you, even just from one place, a really good understanding of a bunch of the different parts of your human design. So I encourage you to get that. And let's dive in to talking about why it's so important that you know where you're going before you get started with that end in mind. And big picture, that could be as specific as your specific business vision that you have. And that could be like broad and have a lot of components to it. That could be a certain revenue amount or a certain number of clients that you want to impact. But having that information, being clear about that information within a realistic time frame. So some of us have this really big calling and big vision. I think actually everybody does, no matter what your income goals are, or your business vision is. We want to help change lives. We want to change our own lives in a way that creates more prosperity for our families, more support and love shared out into the world with the amazing gifts that you have to give. And when you actually get clear on where you're going, the beginning part actually becomes more intentional. And what is so important for you to hear out of this is that the way that you begin anything from an energetic perspective or from a strategic perspective will directly impact the success that you have in bringing that vision to life and actually achieving that end goal that you desire. And the correlation between your success, your ability to manifest what you desire in your life, is directly related to how you start that project, that activity, that scaling, pivoting, evolving, whatever you're doing in your business. But all too often, what happens is people start without really thinking about where they're going, without getting specific enough about where they're going and how they're going to get there. So, that moment of starting, the beginning of any project, any next level of your business, is rooted ultimately in fear and chaos. And that might be bold to say, but I really want you to reflect on how you've been showing up in your business, how things are starting in your business. And if you feel like worried or fear or this like chaotic energy of not knowing where you're going or how you're going to get there or exactly what you need to be doing, that is directly correlated to the fact that we are not yet clear enough of what it is that we're trying to create. And as the CEO, as the leader of your business, of the people that you're here to serve, the clients you're here to serve, you need to have that vision very dialed in because then you start from a different place. You start with intentionality, and that directly impacts how you are showing up. That impacts the decisions that you're making, the actions that you're taking, all of that. So let's dive into this from an energetic perspective. When you start from a place of fear versus a place of empowerment, because you might not have a clear picture of where you're going, when you have that, when you don't have the clear picture, that's when the fear shows up at the beginning. But when you have that clear picture of what you're trying to create, even if it's 1 year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, like I take people through with the Aligned Business Blueprint program, some amount of time in a specific place that you want to be, you will be so much more empowered from the very beginning if you know what you're trying to create than if you don't think about that end and just get started. This is where so many people are like, right, throwing spaghetti at the wall. You hear the start messy, and I am not like proponent of that. It doesn't energetically feel good for you, and it doesn't actually even come off, it comes off energetically discombobulated to the people you're trying to attract into your business. And so you may be getting people who are not showing up actually for your calls, even if you are getting clients, because your energy isn't isn't strong, isn't feeling stable, or you might not be selling as many clients into your programs as you desire, or you are like hustling and doing so many things because you're focused on all the doing, but aren't certain if the specific things that you're doing are getting you to where you want to go. And when you begin a project out of that fear or doubt or insecurity, that directly will manifest scarcity in your business, in your life, because fear does not directly lead to abundance, right? We have to shift our energetics. We have to shift the energy with which we are creating in order to create a more positive outcome. And that an example of this is when you're maybe hesitating launching a new offer in your business, or maybe you are launching something and you're getting underwhelming results, but it's because you're like, I need to make revenue. So I'm just going to launch something and hope that it works. Or I want to hit this income goal. And so I'll just add another launch or another offer into my business suite, my offer suite, and like that'll put me over the edge. From that place of doing things out of fear or out of randomness and chaos, our energy is not supporting not long-term success, stability, and profitability from that for the long term. And what I want you to take away from this is that you have the power to shift that. But really, what it takes is having this shift from fear to empowerment. Really, that's how you move into expansion, right? Is because you are empowered, you feel empowered as the creator of your business. And I've never met a person in the entire time I've been doing business that can't make something happen, isn't willing to do the work, isn't willing to put the energy into creating something. But what I have seen all too often is people that are not sure where to put their energy, or if they're doing putting it in the right place, or they're giving too much of it. And really, they're not coming from that empowered place because they have not yet seen exactly what they want in their business. Or they're maybe really wondering, okay, I want to have this really big goal. I don't even know where to start. I'm going to try some things. And y'all, that's why it's so important to create a business plan. Obviously, I preach this all the time, but having a plan of where you're going and how you're going to get there, that is how you create empowerment from a strategic perspective, which we'll get to here in a minute. But from an energetic perspective, you will have a calmer nervous system. You will be in a higher vibration because you are already starting to see that vision coming to life on paper. And so the way that you are showing up will be more empowered because you can see it, even if it's just on paper, before it is in your reality. And so energetically, you are going to be more empowered because what you need to do, how to focus your time, your energy. And That is how you manifest abundance, is starting from this empowered energy. And what's most important here is that you have to be intentional. When you are actually from that empowered place, you start to take intentional actions. You start to make intentional decisions about how you're using your time, how you are using your energy and your resources. And when you are intentional at the beginning of your project, at the beginning of the next evolution of your business, the expansion of your business, then that sets the tone for the entire journey. And you can see how starting your journey from an empowered place will have such a better outcome than from a fearful place. And some practical things you can do or explore from an energetic perspective. And this is something I have been diving much more deeply into over the last few months, is really starting to understand energetics and how all of this works. And that is paying really close attention to how your body is responding, is talking to you. And that when you feel that nervous system deregulation or the anxiety or the fear or those negative vibrational feelings, I encourage you to do things that help raise your vibration. And there's a lot of ways to do that. There's a really cool thing I would encourage you to Google called the frequency of emotions. Just for those of you that want to like really ground into some practical, tangible, scientific backing to this, it shows that the actual emotions that we feel, we are vibrating at different frequencies when we feel those emotions. And so in order to manifest and create from a higher vibration, from a more empowered vibration, which is a higher level emotion, we need to actually start moving up that energy vibrational scale. And so, doing things, I would presume if you're listening to this podcast, you have all the many tools in your toolbox already. And if not, like connect with me. I've got lots of friends I can refer you to and people that help with this type of work because whether that is going outside and being in nature, going for a walk, doing some sort of physical activity, to working with someone from in EFT or doing breath work or getting massages, like what you do is specific to you and what you're wanting to accomplish in your journey and what makes you feel good. But shifting your vibrational energy happens not just by thinking about it. There's an active component to it of you moving that energy through you to do something, to be in a higher vibe so that you can create that plan from an empowered place. So, as you're thinking about this from an energetic perspective, remember that we have to be intentional in the energy with which we are creating anything in our lives and our businesses. And if you are feeling yourself in that fear energy, in that like chaotic energy, I encourage you to do some of these things to just move the energy in your body. But that leads us directly into this next part, which is from the strategic perspective. How do we allow ourselves to start from that more empowered place? And what's really interesting is there's so many people who I've talked to that are actually almost nervous or afraid to write down on a piece of paper, write out their business plan in this fear that it won't come to life, right? That it won't actually ever be a reality. Or I've actually even seen many people don't even know all of the components of a business plan or all the components of your business that you need in order to really create that strong foundation for your business. And that's where I see people like just avoiding doing that, but then you're missing fundamental parts of your business. And this is what I take people through in the Aligned Business Blueprint program. That's why I created the Spiritual Business Incubator so I can help give people more and more resources and support in creating those strong foundations. And whether that's the foundation in starting your business, evolving, pivoting, or scaling it, you need a strategic business plan at each of those levels. And from that strategic perspective, when we talk about starting from being empowered or being intentional, you have to have clarity on your vision and writing something down, even if the first time is I'm just you're writing a short story or you're writing something that may you even tell yourself, like, I don't have to act on this. But we have the ability to write things down that our minds are maybe afraid of figuring out how it comes together. And starting to write things down of what the end actually looks like. What does that business look like that is allowing you to have the life that you desire? When you start to write it down strategically, what happens is you are actually seeing, oh, this isn't as scary as I thought it was, or it's not as hard to put together, or ideas will start to come up, or opportunities will happen because you've started to write down what you want. And having that clear vision before you start any business initiative is going to allow you to be more empowered when you begin because you know where you're going. And when you take that intentional action of writing out what does this business practically look like, and you might not have all of the details, but write down as much as you have to get started, right? That's a really good place to get started. What does that ultimate thing look like? And if you haven't really allowed yourself to do that because you're stuck in starting without having that vision, then that might be why you're not yet at that vision and why that vision feels so much harder from a strategic, practical, what are the steps to making this happen perspective. And also, when you get this intentionality of starting to really focus in on the end, you start to actually be less random, be less chaotic, because you're seeing, oh, if this is what I'm trying to create, then here are the ways that I'm going to create that. And this is something that maybe you do or don't know what the steps are. This is why working with someone like me or working through the process of a business plan is so valuable because we're actually going through these steps together. We're aligning it in my programs with your human design so that the strategic business that you're building is aligned with who you are, with how you've been designed, with your life purpose, with your life goals. And an example that I want you to think about this is creating content is something I hear all the time from people like, I don't know what content to create or what I need to be talking about. And from a marketing perspective, there's different seasons and reasons that you would be creating content in different ways, right? If you're launching in active launch mode, that looks different than if you're not actively launching. If you are trying to just build your audience versus trying to convert your audience into sales, like that different content and messaging happens, but we just go out there. I have to create content and then we're creating stuff and it feels random and it's draining your energy because you don't know where the end goal of that is. And that leads to this chaotic, unfocused energy that comes off of you, comes off of your content in this example, that then people feel off of you when you're trying to do the things with them, right? Get them in your programs, get them to get on your email list, to actually serve them and support them. That energy that you're coming off of, that how you are starting any of those activities, that energy is felt by the people you're trying to communicate it to. So I encourage you deeply to really think about where are you going, right? What does that end look like? And being really intentional when you're starting of how you're going to get there. And if you need support in that, absolutely reach out on my Instagram at I am Anna Nichols. This is something that I help people through is creating that aligned business plan so that how are you taking your unique gifts and skills through your human design and applying them directly to all of the components of your business, whether that's, like I said, starting, scaling, evolving, pivoting, in each of these sort of phases of your business, it's going to take a new plan. It's going to take you assessing where you're at and where you're going. And I would love to help you out on that. So, what I want to now talk about a little bit is giving you a little bit more practical application, practical ideas from that energetic perspective and from a strategic perspective because that's what we're here for, right? We don't want to just learn for the sake of learning. What I hope is that you're taking the stuff that you hear in this podcast and at least contemplating it, thinking about it, or actually taking action on this. And a recap on some of the things from an energetic perspective that you can do is when you are feeling in that chaotic, fearful, doubting, insecure energy. One of the things that's so wonderful about human design is when you start learning things about your human design and recognize like this thing that I'm doing is not aligned with me, with who you are, right? Understanding your not self theme or your self theme. So if you are feeling, frustrated as a generator or a manifesting generator, or angry as a manifester, or bitter as a projector, or disappointed as a reflector, you're noticing that it's telling you this is a sign that something's out of alignment and that we need to shift something. But you can't shift and make that like next step without changing your vibration so that what happens next is coming from a more empowered place. And so I encourage you to do things like visualization, affirmations, energy clearing, subconscious work, breath work, EFT, massages, nature. There are so many ways for you to do that from that energetic perspective. And I would even go as far as to say, is in human design, when you're looking at your chart, each of the gates within your chart you see it over and over, right? It tells you what does it look like when you're out of alignment and what does it look like when you are in alignment. So what is the negative side or the low end of the spectrum or frequency look, and what does the more positive end of the spectrum look like? And taking responsibility that it's up to you to recognize this, gain this awareness, and be intentional in how do you move more into that gift, that high vibe, positive side of the spectrum, and taking responsibility that you are doing this not only for yourself, but for you to be able to step into the leader that you are meant to be, the CEO that you're meant to be, to create the life that you truly desire. And that starts within and deciding that you are going to do what it takes to create that. I encourage you to do all of these types of like activities to help raise your vibration. And then from a strategic perspective, I would really encourage you to start getting clear on what do you want to create? What do you want your business to look like 3 years from now? And if that feels too hard, even think of 1 year from now. But I actually don't think that 1 year is too short of a time frame for us to really create something that has long-term sustainability. You can absolutely make a significant amount of progress and shifts within your business in the course of 1 year. But then it feels like we're starting again almost too soon. We want to know a little bit farther out, where are you going so that those 3 years, so those next few years are really building something that is going to sustain and last you way longer than the 3 years. But 1 year, sometimes people feel rushed to get things done. And that's where that chaotic energy comes in. Whereas 3 years gives us a little bit more like, feels more tangible, more practical. Like I can accomplish this goal within 3 years. And something that I want to give you a specific example about in how we do this, which this example, for what it is worth, this person did have pretty quick outcomes, pretty quick shifts by creating this plan. But I have worked with a client who very much was creating something in her business that she had just been told to create, right? She went through a coaching program, was told that the way that you build a successful 6-figure business is by having this one signature program. And it's the only way, or it's the best way for you to get to where you want to go. And that model is something she followed for a long time because she didn't have any business background, but she really wanted to help people and was starting to have a little bit of success with that. But as she continued in her business, she was really capped at her income level because of the amount of time that she could serve in the way that she had designed her program. And she knew she wanted not only more in her business, but to help more clients, and had actually some blocks and some resistance towards certain types of offer models and things like that because of past experiences. And then also, it had been so deeply programmed into her, told her that this one way is the right way. And I share this with you because what I want you to take away from this is that, remember, friends, all of the strategies work, and it's your job as the CEO, as the leader, to be intentional in designing your business in the way that not only feels good for you, but actually helps you achieve your goals in the way that you envision and desire. And so, even if someone has said that this is the right way or that's the right way, you ultimately have the power to do whatever you want. And when I was working with this client, there were certain things that she had dreamed about, but didn't think were ever possible. And also, there were things that she had done for a long time that brought her some success, but really weren't getting her to the level that she desired. And so, having to make these pivots in how she was attracting clients, how she was attracting leads, people onto her list, to how she was actually structuring not only her one program, but the multiple types of programs and offers that she wanted to have so she could serve people at different levels from both an energetic perspective, like stepping into that empowered energy and knowing that this is what I want to create. I believe in myself to create it. I am going to do the things it takes for me to get there. And from a strategic perspective, actually mapping it out and being thoughtful of, okay, maybe where I'm at right now has it's been good. Maybe it hasn't been as good as I want, but I've gotten here. What am I intentionally doing in the future in order to get me to where I want to specifically go? And I encourage you all to really think about, how are you showing up in business? Are you in that beginning stage of anything, a project, an offer, something that you're launching, the thinking about scaling and going to the next level? What's the energy from which you're showing up in? And what strategically are you planning on doing in order to get to where you're wanting to go? And if you don't know what you're strategically going to do, and if the energy with which you're showing up with is low vibe and from that fear and doubt place, just allow yourself to be aware of that. Don't judge yourself or feel bad about it, which is, I know, what probably most of us are doing anyway, because we want to be farther along or feel like we've reached some level of success by a certain time in our business. And if you've never actually sat down to write a comprehensive business plan, then you may have gotten success in out of luck or randomness, or mm, you may not be where you want to be. But going through this process of thinking of where you ultimately want to be, this is the right, the end. That's what we do with the business plan, is this is where I want to be at a certain period of my business. Because then when you start from an energetic perspective, you're more empowered. And from a strategic perspective, the actions that you're taking, the decisions that you're making are not random, they are intentional. And so you can see how that type of energy, that type of behavior, that type of leadership is going to lead you into achieving what you desire and getting what you desire in your business so much more quickly. So, if you are going to have one takeaway, my friends, thinking about this episode of beginning with the end in mind, this title is both about the beginning and the end. Both of these moments matter. And these are the points that we really need to get clear on, both from an energetic perspective, right? How do I want to feel at both of these points? And what does it strategically and practically look like at both of these points? Because the journey between the beginning and the end is so much more clear, is so much simpler, so much more in alignment when you know both the beginning and the end, when you actually start to walk down the path. So until next time, my friends, cheers to your success.